Welcome out to the Trading Justice podcast. This is episode number 204, which is an incredible feat, but I think this one just in and of itself is pretty awesome. What we did here today, guys, is we did a live book club podcast where we invited you guys, and hopefully you got that message. If you were one of those who attended live, we appreciate you being there. We had a lot of energy, a really good crowd, and a lot of our favorite people out there were able to show up. And I know not everybody can always show up live, which is why we put the podcast out on iTunes so that you can listen to it in your car or in your earbuds or wherever it is that you are traveling, even sitting at your desk and sit and listen to the Trading Justice podcast. We bring these to you guys for a lot of reasons, but I think the message in today's podcast is a big part of that. And Matt, it was a powerful conversation. There's no question about it. One that I enjoyed and even got emotional at times, fun at times. What can you say about this podcast people are going to be listening to?
Well, I thought it was just a fantastic conversation on a great book that has influenced the lives of many, many, many entrepreneurs and business people for the last, 80-odd some years. It was a conversation I did not expect it going that direction at times and that long at other times, but I mean, it felt like it just flew by as we were talking about mindset, about we were going over the each of the 12 steps, 13 if you want to include the fears as well, and I got emotional too at times, just thinking about kind of having that type of mindset and whatnot. It was an awesome podcast. It was everything we envisioned the book club becoming when we started it many months ago. So I was very excited. We had a great attendance, great people, good conversation. Loved the comments, and I think that's one thing that people don't get when they're listening to the podcast versus attending the live, is the interaction they get with other people in our community of asking questions and answering each other's questions and making comments. And thought the energy was good. Thought the conversation was better. And what a wonderful book Napoleon Hill wrote about many, many, many years ago.
The book is Think and Grow Rich. The author is Napoleon Hill, and maybe one of the most read financial books of all time for a reason. It is 80 years old this year, birthed out of the Great Depression, Matt, and really still a very relevant message here today. A couple of reminders here, and leave us a review on iTunes, number one. Go into your app or go into the actual software and write something about us on our page. Go and subscribe. Make sure that if you've got your phone or if you've got a podcast app, make sure you subscribe to Trading Justice so the episodes will come, and get involved in the community over there at Tackle Trading. If you want to try a pro membership out, you can always try it for 15 days with the promo code JUSTICE, and Justice15, I believe, when you sign up for the promo code. If you ever need help with anything, email team at Tackle Trading and get a hold of our producer, Cam. Matt, what a wonderful conversation, and thank you for, driving and being a leader the way you were. There were moments during this chat, Matt, that just reminded me of, everything we always talk about, what we preach about, and it was fun to listen to.
No, it was great. I'm looking forward to seeing the conversation and comments develop as people listen to the podcast, and hopefully everybody gets even a nugget, right, Tim? Even a nugget, just one nugget that they can apply in their own businesses, their own lives. Because I think what Napoleon talked about was, the art of making a successful entrepreneur, but I think what he was really referencing was the art of making a successful individual. And I think the commonalities that he wrote about can be applied in almost every aspect of things we do in our everyday life. And I love the book. I think it was a great conversation with you, Tim, and I look forward to having many more. And you guys, we'll be back with another edition of the podcast later this week, released on Friday of this week. Live look-in with me and my team out there in LA, and then we'll be back on a regularly scheduled podcast and everything we do at the Trading Justice Company next Monday as well. Sit back, listen to the live Trading Justice Book of the Month, Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich.
Your Trading Justice podcast is brought to you by Tackle Trading. Our weekly scouting reports will change your trades from 8s to 9s and from 9s to dimes. If you're sick of the bench, get in the game, and get in the game with Tackle Trading.
All right, welcome back to the Trading Justice podcast presented by Tackle Trading. We're in this this area of the podcast. We're looking at continuing our ongoing series, the Trading Justice Book Club of the Month. We started the book club about 6-7 months ago with an intention to, or a desire, I should say, to get people reading more about things that actually matter instead of Facebook. I believe I was talking to Tim one time, and I said, Tim, we got to get people off Facebook. It's driving me crazy. And he says, yeah, we got to get people reading more. And both of us were like, oh, yeah, we're doing a book club. Getting out there and I think one of the most, and we're reading here, and we're meaning to go over just the absolute wonderful book, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, his bestseller, self-made, self-help book. Probably, Tim, the number one self-help book that has ever been written in 1937. 20 years of his life dedicated to interviewing some of the most successful, brightest minds in a collaboration with Carnegie to really, find what the formula is for success. And we've had some awesome book clubs out there, talking about trading books, some mindset books. I think this was definitely one of my favorites, a book that I read many years ago, like many of you did. But even today, in 2017, the principles that he went through, 189, 90 years ago still are relevant in today's world. And that's something that's so amazing, that we can read about some guy who wrote this book in 1937 that's still relevant today. Outside of the, the one about sexuality, I think outside of that might be a little dated, Tim.
Well, we'll get into that.
Say companion. Maybe we should just say companion on that one. But I thought it was a wonderful read, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Well, I'll tell you, there's several things I have in my mind right now. Number one, guys, if you're out there and you're listening, we are going to always challenge ourselves and you to continue education. That includes reading stuff, listening to stuff, doing stuff, honestly, Matt, self-development is one of the most important things that you and I do on a daily basis. And reading 30 minutes, an hour a day is a smart thing for your life. Think and Grow Rich is a classic. And I have a lot of opinions designed around it and thoughts about it. And we'll go through it step by step here tonight. I kind of put my show notes together here. And if you're out there listening in the podcast, get back in the clubhouse and post your thoughts. We have a thread going there as well, even if you're listening to this days down the road, because we want to hear your opinions on the book as well. Napoleon Hill, Matt, 1937, you were in the heart and coming right out of the Depression. And so it was a very difficult time for the country. And I think his message was designed intentionally because of that. It was to give people the opportunity of self-empowerment, of improvement, and to do it through thought and through attitude and through actions. And I really love the book, and it's a really good mix of left brain and right brain. You had mentioned the book club. Think about the books that we've listened to or that we've read. Start with why. Money, Tony Robbins, Master the Game, 401 Chaos, The Richest Man in Babylon. Many of these mindset books, this is the history of what we've read, but a lot of it started right here with Napoleon Hill in Think and Grow Rich. Many of the things that he wrote about were groundbreaking. Many of the things were revolutionary. Many were not. And I do have some critiques of the book as well, and I think that any good book club, you can't just say all good things. You have to give an honest critique of the thing. But definitely excited about it. Guys, agenda for tonight. We're going to have fun. We're going to discuss the book, myself and Matt. Then we will field everybody's questions, Matt. We'll kind of do a live version of, the coach's mailbag. We'll do it right here in Adobe. We'll take some questions. And then we'll have final thoughts from you and I and takeaways. You ready to go?
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to it.
Okay, the origins of Napoleon Hill's book really come from the New Thought movement at the turn of the century. If you study history and if you study philosophy, this idea of self-improvement and coaching and, even productivity became a very big thing as, media started pushing newspapers out there, radio became more popular, and you had new mediums of these new age philosophers. There was this mindset, this idea of the law of attraction, how to win friends and influence people. Books like this, Matt, were very popular. And really, if you think about it, a very different medium at the time. The book was one of the major ways that you could deliver content, right? And you could get your message out there. And that's where Napoleon Hill came in. He had an organized approach to achievement. And one of the things I was telling you the other day that I was fascinated with, reading the book again, and I read it probably 12 years ago, and then I read it again this last month. And he is very much an artist when it comes to attacking the left brain and the right brain reader. Every conversation, everything he talks about, he'll go on into deep stories, and he'll talk about things Dale Carnegie told him to do, or the reason why he started the book. He'll go into imaginative kind of descriptive wording in the way that he writes. And then he'll tell a story about meeting Henry Ford, or how Henry Ford started his company, or whatever it was. But then right in the heart of every chapter, Matt, there's always a good old-fashioned checklist. 7 steps to doing this and 12 steps to doing this. As a teacher, you've perfected the idea of being able to teach somebody in both different quadrants, left brain, right brain, different learning styles. Talk about the importance of that in your opinion when you read a book. Do you like that? Do you like how the author did that?
Well, a couple things. Number one, I think there is a defined purpose what Napoleon is doing here. He's hitting both sides of the equation, from the creative to the logical mind. Somebody who thinks in step by steps versus the visionary. It's and people who have seen me speak, they've heard me talk about how, you had Dr. King get up in the March on Washington, and he said, I had a dream. I have a dream that we're going to do this, and my children, all this stuff. And what he didn't do is get up and say, here's a 6-step action plan on how we're going to cure racism in America. He started with that creative approach, but it doesn't mean the analytical approach doesn't work. And what Napoleon is doing here, like in his first step, and I'm sure we'll get into it with desire, he talks about the importance to have that desire to become successful. And I know it's kind of crazy to think about this, but not everybody has that desire. Some people are a little bit scared of it to a certain extent. But then he talks about, okay, here's those 6 steps that you have to do. So he talks about the creative, having the vision, and then here's what you do on a daily basis. Like you say to yourself your goals in the morning and night. Here's that step-by-step action plan. And I love how he went about going about hitting both sides of the equation. He will spend the majority on working on the creative mind, and then he'll say, okay, for you analyticals out here, here's that 6-step, 7-step, 10-step action plan on what you have to do to achieve it. It's something that I do in teaching quite a bit, for those of you who have seen me teach. For those of you who have seen me teach at my 3-day training for legacy, you will notice that I'll spend an hour on the historical nature of something, the why, the historical reason behind why we need to do something, and then I'll lay out, well, here's the rules of exactly what we do. It's very similar in that approach. I've kind of adopted from an educational perspective a very similar approach, and no, I did not get it from Napoleon Hill. It's something that I believe in from an educational teaching perspective, that you have to give the historical perspective, the reasonings, the creative vision behind why you do the things that we do, and then you can adopt the step-by-step formula and and what it takes to achieve that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's no question about it. And, I talk about this all the time. In most great books, financial books or any other book, you have to have a mix of storytelling and context and motivation and inspiration and all that kind of stuff. You don't want a book to only be like a user's manual on how to start, go and change the oil out of your car. That doesn't really affect people's lives. You have to have a mix of everything. And I really think that Napoleon Hill really hit that very well. I don't think it was accidental, obviously. Man's an author. He knows what sells, and he knows how to appeal to a mass audience.
Well, and he also started writing at the age of 13 years old as well. He was a dedicated individual to his craft. He spent over 20 years interviewing, researching some of the brightest minds of the time, and it really does come out in his work with that dedication, that craft in mind. And you know, I know sometimes we get caught up. You know, I do wonder this, how that book would have came across if it was a blog in 2017. I do wonder that sometimes in
Well,
the quick the give it to me right now, or I'm not doing thing mentality of 2017.
sure.
The I only have 3 to 5 minutes of time online, or I start losing, you know, conscious to a certain extent, of 2017. This man spent 20 years traveling, researching, dedicating a massive part of his life to finding the formula, what he feels is successful. And yeah, some of it, Tim, I felt even the first time I read it years ago, some of it, I felt that, you know, some of it's a little speakerish to a certain extent. Some of I felt was a little over the top, but at the same time, I felt like it was a great book. It's a life-changing book if you allow it to do just that.
Yeah, there's no question about it. And these are the 14 things that he talks about. He has a 13-point plan and then a 14th one he threw in there just for good measure, Matt. He says that you have to tackle desire. You have to have desire. You have to have faith. You have to practice auto-suggestion. Focus on delivering a specialized knowledge in your, pursuit to gaining wealth and richness. Practice imagination. He has two different types of imagination. Go through organized planning. There was something really interesting in that chapter we'll get to when we get to that slide. Develop the ability to make a decision, always be persistent, grow and improve the power of the mastermind team around you. And, having a power team is something you and I know to be very, very valuable. And then this is where the book gets a little bit, different. The mystery of sex transmutation, going into the subconscious mind, identifying and developing the brain, and getting the sixth sense. And we'll go through those, and I'm going to have some fun with those. But then I love the last chapter, Matt, how to outwit the 6 ghosts of fear. So we're going to go through these one at a time. Now, in the preface, there's a few quotes that I love. Matt, I want you to read that first one out loud.
If you're ready to put it to use, you will recognize this secret at least once every chapter. I wish I might feel privileged to tell you how you will know if you are ready, but that would deprive you of much of the benefit you will receive when you make the discovery in your own way. That quote, in terms of, I wish I could just tell you when you're ready, but it's what's that old saying? The teacher appears when the student is ready.
That's right.
That's what that quote reminds me of.
Everybody wants the answer now. Everybody wants to skip the steps. People don't love this. In fact, when you're a new student or when you first open a book and it's in the preface, you're like, oh no, here we go again. But the reality is this is a trained and veteran author making sure that that person who's the end reader is going to read through to the end and really go through the process. And I think that's an important thing. And there's a reason why we get this message quite often. Also, by the way, Matt, they say everything is a remix. In fact, I just bought a book called Steal Like an Artist. And this reminds me of about 10 different books I've read in the last 20 years. This exact message that the secret or something along those lines. It's interesting. Another quote here I loved in the preface: a peculiar thing about this secret is that those who once acquire it and use it find themselves literally swept on to success with little effort, and they never again submit to failure. And this is the idea behind Think and Grow Rich. There's this magic or transformative ability in this process that if you gain it, if you harness it, if you develop it, that you will become wealthy. The book title is literally right on the nose. Think properly and you will get rich. And mindset is critical. There's no question about it. The first step to Think and Grow Rich, according to Napoleon Hill, was to desire, the starting point of all achievement. Now, Matt, he talks about 6 definitive practical steps that you should go through. Number 1, fix in your mind the amount of money you desire. I had a hard time with this one.
I still do.
First of all, they print too much money, even giving it a number. I'm not sure Napoleon Hill appreciates the role of the Federal Reserve in today's day and age. If he was looking
at it,
they were
still new, Tim.
Yeah.
To be fair to Napoleon, they were still very new in terms of the Central Bank of the United States. And when he wrote that book in 1937, there was a defined amount of money that was printed and could be printed. I wonder how he would have went about that in 2017 when we deal with the amount of money and debt we deal with today. I have a hard time because I don't agree with it. I don't agree that I should fix my mind on an exact amount of money I desire. People
I
have
think you
asked
should
me.
conceptualize your goal, right? I call this the
Yep,
mind's
I
eye.
agree with that, Tim. I totally agree with that. But saying, I want to make $100 million. Well, what's $100 million worth if we hyperinflate? I guess that's my analytical mind coming through in terms of
Sure.
why would I fixate myself on an exact dollar figure when that by fixating yourself on an exact dollar figure, you are limiting potential growth on some capacity. And so I kind of struggle with that, but I understand exactly what he's talking about.
And I love the statement from Jeff and Josh Cole, who are two of our, most veteran team members. And actually, Josh was one of the hosts of a previous book club. He says it right here in the chat. And if you're not attending live, we do these book clubs live in a webinar as well. So for the next one, if you ever want to attend live and come and join the conversation, make sure you keep an eye out for the email and the reminders and the invitations. Josh says here, Matt, you might be able to think of it as this. Set in your mind exactly what you want out of life. Doesn't have to be money, but it must be crystal clear. And I would agree with that. I think if we
And
rephrase
I do
that, I
too.
would be on the nose.
I agree with that too. We should be goal-oriented individuals. We absolutely should. I believe in writing down goals. I believe in going over those on a daily basis. There's many things that you read in Think and Grow Rich that are absolutely amazing. And I don't definitively disagree with this first point. It's just I'm saying I've had a hard time in my own personal life putting me in a position where I purposely limit my ability because I have so much confidence in the ability of man, meaning human beings,
Hmm.
that I don't want to limit that ability. But I totally understand. He's seeing it in his mind's eye, saying, "Okay, you want to be rich. You want to be rich. Fixate on that. See it in your mind, and then you can become something."
Well, and I think that we're going to run into a theme here, and you and I, as kind of we're we're going to critique it, I'm sure, and that's okay. That's what we're here for. But we're going to have to kind of take it in the spirit, not necessarily always the exact
Absolutely.
wording of the intention, because things may have changed. I mean, this was written 80 years ago, if you think about it, literally 80
Well,
years ago.
and honestly, Tim, as I've read that and as I've skimmed through Think and Grow Rich many times in my life, I've always come back to the how would he go about this in 2017? Taking
Yeah.
an amazing work that was written in 1937 and again, in my estimation, one of the if not the best self-help book that has ever been written. How would he have changed that in 2017? And we can go on and on and on about that, but I don't want to be stuck in the mud just fixating on the detail of one clause.
Well, and I do agree with Anshul here in the chat. In that chapter, he also uses an analogy that of a great warlord or warrior who brought his armies across the ocean and then landed, and literally because he did not want to give them the ability to turn back and quit, he lit the boats on fire, right?
Yeah.
And that way you have nothing but desire moving you forward, the starting point of all achievement. You have a strong desire to win that war if you know it's either death or not, right? And I do, and
Yes.
that's a great example of the value in this book because he'll mix in checklist with great stories and context, and I love it. Number two here, determine exactly what you intend to give in return for the money you desire. I think that's important. Three, establish a definitive date when you intend to possess the money. Four, create a definite plan for carrying out your desire. Five, write out a clear, concise statement of the amount of money you intend to acquire. And number six, read your statement aloud twice daily, morning and night. Now, Matt, I can only imagine you at your home. I walk in, you got coffee, you're sitting Zen style, and you're like, I want
Yeah.
$1 trillion.
We all know me more than that. um, we, yeah, we could definitely see me sitting in my home office, all my screens up, drinking my cup of Joe, going over all the news of the day and just pondering, I want $1 trillion. I want a trillion dollars. And
Not
I want to
pondering,
bring up
reading aloud.
reading, not pondering. Okay, I have to read. But Jeff and Josh, I believe they have a great. All modern self-help books utilize a lot of the themes covered in Think and Grow Rich, and I'll talk about one of those self-help books being Rich Dad Poor Dad. I love the way Robert puts that type of same process instead of talking about a defined figure of money, talk about the rat race, getting out of the rat race, controlling your financial future. And so when I start visualizing myself, it's not in this desire to have an exact amount of money. And this is what I'm talking about. It's the desire to control my financial life, regardless of what the cost of money is or the cost of goods are. And so I definitely visualize that. I visualize myself being successful. I visualize myself, being this individual that is a life-changing individual, no doubt about that. I just don't have that desire for a fixated amount. That's the only difference I have.
100%. And this is where, having a vision board, a vision statement, starting with why, writing it out, reminding, Matt, in my own Google Calendar, I have an event every morning called breakfast. Now that's everybody does, I know. But in the comments, I actually put in there my vision statement for my business, and I read it every morning for a reason. 100% love the concept here, and I agree. I think it's an important part of it, and it's an important part of so many of the best messages that we've ever read.
Well, and also, Tim, very quickly on desire, I think this desire, you can apply I truly do believe you can apply the principles of Think and Grow Rich to many aspects of being successful in life, and not just financially. That desire to be healthy, that desire to eat right, that desire to work out, that desire to be rich, that desire to be more charitable. The desire can come in many different shapes and sizes, many different facets of life. And I do believe we should all start with that desire. And that's why I think Napoleon started with desires, because without that desire, it doesn't matter what else comes after that. We all have to have that desire. And a lot of this, it reminds me of like New Year's resolutions to a certain extent, where we have this, that we always write down our New Year's resolutions, and then we lack the action throughout the rest of the year. And that's why we have the exact same New Year's resolutions every year. So that desire can be put forth in almost anything in life.
Yeah. And I got to tell you, you can't be afraid of failure. I mean, the reason why he says start with desire, start with a motivation, start with a vision, quite frankly, is because if you're afraid, and we'll get to the fear part later, then you just won't do anything anyway. You have to be willing to push, right? Michael Jordan was the greatest basketball player ever, not necessarily just because of his athleticism, but because he worked his butt off probably harder than anybody on mechanics every day, right? That drive, that going out to the range and hitting balls, or reading every day, or practice trading, or being willing to backtest 1,000 times to perfect one strategy. At some point, you have to be willing to fail and succeed, because you're going to push no matter what. And I love this whole mindset behind it. A couple of great quotes here, Matt, from that first chapter. Actually the second chapter, but I believe in the power of desire backed by faith. And he does get into faith here in a moment. All achievement, no matter what it may be its nature or its purpose, must begin with an intense, burning desire for something definite. And remember, no more effort is required to aim high in life, to demand abundance and prosperity, than is required to accept misery and poverty. Now, that last one, Matt, I think both of us would probably agree with that 100%, right? You can choose to go out and be great, or you can choose to lose. You can choose poverty. And the energy and the effort is the same, right?
Well,
and
Tim,
so much mindset.
You mentioned Michael Jordan. You can say the same thing about Kobe Bryant, or the same thing about Tom Brady, or the same thing about Ricky Henderson. They had these individuals that became great, the people you listed, they had a desire that nothing stopped them. And they became historical examples. And you can say the same thing in business with people like Bill Gates, or people like Steve Jobs, who weren't exactly traditional and who were inspired by people like Napoleon Hill, or the guy Zuckerberg from Facebook and whatnot. But Tim, I got a question for you. Can you create that desire in others that don't necessarily have the same will that the people you mentioned do?
You can lead a horse to water, you can't make it drink. You can't create, you can inspire it, you can get it almost there, but they have to take the last step, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if you can create the whole thing, because you can provide an example. There's a reason why we talk about power team, the mastermind group, all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, Matt, you can't make somebody do it. I will tell you this. I have friends in my life who are broke, who should bang down my door, knock into my office, and come and learn how to trade, or learn how to get better in business, or whatever it is, and they just don't do it. So you can't make them.
No, no, you can't. You cannot force somebody to have a desire that otherwise they won't put the effort into. But I do believe that you can give people that opportunity. And I do believe you can give everybody that opportunity, regardless of gender, regardless of race, regardless of sexuality, regardless of time frame, regardless of circumstance, regardless of nation of origin. I believe you can lead those people to that conclusion, but they have to agree to drink.
Absolutely. And this leads us to our second step, actually, in the growth towards riches, and he talks about faith, Matt. Faith to the author was visualization of and the belief in attainment of desire. So you have the desire, then you have to believe you can actually get it. Now, for people who don't have proof or need proof because they're a natural skeptic, this one can be a hard one. Even the word faith in the current world we live in probably turns some analyticals off of the entire chapter. But the reality is you got to believe in yourself, right? When you get up on in front of people, you got to believe you're going to deliver a good message. When I sit down to trade, I have to have faith and confidence that I'm going to do a good job. I'm going to run my business. Faith. It's a kind of a touchy word for some, but I don't run away from it. I think faith is a very important part of any successful venture, including building wealth. What do you think, Matt?
Well, faith can be interpreted in so many different ways from so many different angles. But what I think Napoleon is really kind of getting at here is the faith in one's self, one's own purpose, one's own accomplishment. But it's a state of mind more than it is anything else. It's the state of mind that you believe that you deserve this, that you believe that you can accomplish this, that you believe that you believe in yourself more than anything else. And I'm going to tell you guys right now, I've taught tens of thousands of people from around the world, and I'll tell you, in my estimation, having the faith in oneself is one of the key components of success in almost every capacity. Believing that you're good enough, believing that you're smart enough, believing that you deserve this, believing that if put into the right situation that you will accomplish whatever you set yourself out to. I believe that's very, very important.
There's no question about it. And, he talks about a self-confidence formula. We'll get into those steps here in a minute. I love this quote here. Write out a statement of your major purpose. Matt, the word vision comes to mind for me because I actually do this with my students. I make them write their vision for their business. That could also be major purpose. Or definite chief aim. Commit it to memory. Repeat it in audible words day after day until these vibrations of sound have reached your subconscious mind. Now, this
Well,
is
hold
where...
on, hold on. Luke says a good comment here. He says, faith is submitting our intellect to a higher power. And that can be interpreted, Luke, in many capacities, and I agree with it 100%. When you take it from a religious perspective, you're putting your faith, our intellect, in the faith of something higher than us, some higher energy to a certain extent. But and faith in terms of what Napoleon Hill is talking about, I believe it's our intellect into something bigger than us, that subconscious. And Napoleon talks about that subconscious later on in the steps, having the faith that our subconscious is better than our conscious mind. And that takes a strong degree of faith because, Tim, you mentioned the analytical individual. The analytical wants rules. They want evidence. They want something specific and definite. But to achieve some of the greatest things that we have achieved, it starts with, I am going to create something amazing that nobody has done before, and I'm going to change the course of human history because I believe that we're going to get there, and I believe that I can be a part of something good for the world. And it's like, and I can't tell you how many times Tim and I have had this conversation. Okay, I want to do this. We want to do this. We're gonna be this. And it's like, well, what are the step-by-steps of how we're going to achieve that? And Tim, you've heard me say this many times. I don't know, but we're going to do it. I mean, I've said that to Tim many times. I mean, even the creation of this podcast, guys, which now has over 200,000 downloads, even the creation of this podcast was just a creation out of a idea that I was having 3 years ago, where I just literally called up Tim. I said, Tim, we need to get this message out to the masses. And he's like, well, how are we going to do that? I said, I don't know. We're going to create a podcast. He goes, have you ever done a podcast, Matt? And I said, no. And he goes, well, how do you create positive? I don't know. We're going to figure it out, though. We're going to believe in ourselves, and we're going to go out there and put it out there. Sometimes the best decisions we've ever made are decisions that we've done where we had little evidence, but we saw something that could be amazing. It could be great. And we didn't know how to get there, but we still took that leap of faith. We still took that decision. Learning how to trade, Tim. Back October of 2005, I still remember it. You had already made a couple trades, and basically you called me up and you say, hey, Matt, we're going to learn how to trade. We're going to go to this seminar. We're going to learn how to do this. And I was just like, well, all right, 2 feet. Let's go get it done. Right? Let's not think about it. Let's not consider. Let's go do it. And that's another thing that Napoleon talks about in the book, where he says, strong people, they make decisions quick, but then they stay true to it. And I think that has a lot to do with faith. I think that has a lot to do with faith in one's own inner ability to figure things out along the way. And yes, there's no doubt I am a doer. Sometimes you just got to figure it out.
And I'll tell you, it is an important part of your journey. You got to be willing to make mistakes, even in the face of any challenges you deal with. And desire and faith, starting with those two things right up front, I think there's a reason why they're number one and number two here. If you have a clear vision, if you have clear commitment, then you can deal with challenges. So I'm with you 100%.
And you brought it up, the first two principles, desire and faith. Without desire and without faith, it doesn't matter what else comes after that. If you don't believe in yourself, it doesn't matter what the step-by-step guide is. Because number one, you're not going to do it. And number two, you're never going to follow through, and you're never going to overcome the mistakes along the way. If you don't have a desire and if you don't have the faith that you can achieve that desire, whatever that desired result is, it doesn't matter what he writes about. And that's why I love the fact that he started with those two.
Well, and then here's a condensed version of his self-confidence formula to build up that ability to have that faith, and he says, be persistent. We talk about this in trading, Matt, getting a daily routine, having continuous action. You do it one step at a time. You are persistent in your approach to learning, to growing. This is the education continuum, how to become great at anything. Concentrate on your thoughts for 30 minutes daily. Focus on trading. You have to do it regularly on your business, whatever it is. Devote 10 minutes daily to developing self-confidence. Now, I don't know if that means you stand in the mirror and just say, hey, you're gorgeous, dude. You are handsome. You are strong. You can do this. How does Matt develop 10 minutes of daily self-confidence? Or do you just already have enough?
Wake up.
Yeah, you just
I wake up. I wake up. I put my sweatpants on, put my t-shirt on, put my Billy White shoes on, put my hat on, my A's hat, put it on backwards, sometimes forward, don't know how to. Then I walk in front of the mirror and I say, "You're dead sexy, man. You are one sexy man. You are going to change the world today just because of how sexy you are." That's what I do. No, I'm kidding, guys. But I have told people to do that. I have been in a seminar and I say, "Hey guys, why do you question yourselves? Why do you beat yourselves up? Why don't you just go in front of the mirror and tell how good looking you are and how amazing you are and how you're going to change the world and how you're going to be a leader and how you're going to be rich and how you're going to be doing this and how you're going to just be your absolute most effective and your absolute most efficient self. Stop saying bad things to yourself." And I guarantee if Napoleon Hill was alive today and wrote this book in 2013 instead of 1937, he would talk about the haters and the trolls on the internet who just say bad things about everybody because they are brave behind keystrokes. But you guys are amazing. Everybody here is amazing. I believe in every one of you so much to achieve your greatness, and a lot of that comes to that having that self-confidence and having the belief in oneself. And I've also seen so many people come from so many backgrounds that have achieved financial and personal greatness through a simple belief in one's own ability. And I think that's a beautiful message.
I think it's an important message, and it goes to the next step here. Never stop trying to attain your chief aim in life. Guys, this is the purpose of life. It's a journey, and you're moving towards your goals. You're moving towards your vision always. Engage in no transaction which does not benefit all whom it affects. I really love this one, Matt. There's an ethic in his message throughout the book, and I think there's a reason why, people were attracted to this message throughout. It's about empowerment. It's about process. It's about getting wealthy. It's about achieving success. But he also has this, let's help each other out. This is how we're going to better society.
Well,
You have to remember that this book was written in the back end or the middle of the Great Depression,
Great Depression.
and
Yeah.
he's trying to tell everybody, guys, we can all get rich together. And it's a message you share. I've heard it before, Matt. It's a message you and I believe in 100%.
Oh man, Tim, you've seen me get on a soapbox on this one before, and I'll try not to get on that soapbox tonight. But I'm a trained lawyer. I'm a trained negotiator. That's one of my specialties is negotiations and all the lawyer tricks that come across with negotiations. I have truly believed in my entire life that the best negotiation is one that benefits all. The best transaction is one that benefits everybody, and that we as a society have a responsibility in the social contract to each other. I truly do believe that. And when we see from a financial perspective transactions going to benefit just one party and not the other, I think that's a turn for the worst. And I've seen that from a financial perspective over the last 20 to 30 years. I've seen it just in the course of the last 2 to 3 years. I've definitely seen it this year. And it's what I call greed. It's when we get greedy, it's all about us. It's about me, Matt Justice, or Tim Justice, or it's about the individual. And that is not the best for everybody. What the best thing for Matt Justice is if what's good for everybody. And I've said this many times, Tim, that there's enough money in our system, even in 1937, 1938, when Napoleon Hill is talking about this coming out of the Great Depression, there's enough money out there for everybody. It's not going to be given to people, but in financial transactions, in transactions of any capacity, the best transactions are one that benefit the whole and not that benefit the singular person.
Yeah, we have to remember this, and we have to remind everybody else out there of this. And I love that you mentioned the words social contract. And, Matt, to me, reading many of these books and even reading Napoleon Hill here and looking at the, kind of the history of how this evolved, this self-development, coaching, mindset kind of attitude, it so is a product of the Enlightenment in the 19th century. Now, it doesn't read like those philosophers, but it's a product.
There's in it though. If you have read John Locke, for example, who in my estimation is one of the better social contract theorists. If you've read Rousseau or if you've read Thomas Hobbes, who is a little more dark and evil, but if you've read the social contract theorist, then you'll see that almost in almost every economic design and I see that social contract coming out even in Napoleon Hill's works. And
Absolutely.
And too many people in society today don't even know what a social contract is or how it impacts what government does or what we do as individuals within a government regime. That leads me to one conclusion, Tim. One of the books of the month coming up is definitely going to be one of the social contract books. I don't know which one. We'll make that decision, but we're definitely going to do a social contract.
Probably
It's
should
got to
be
be Locke.
We'll debate it later. I will tell you this, though. I totally picked up on things like, messages from Descartes in terms of philosophy. Hobbes and Locke, I agreed with. Rousseau's a good call. Sartre came later, existentialism, but the mind is the measure idea.
Yeah.
It's all woven together, The greatest theorists also, they have an impact on so many things in life. And this is where education, many times when you're thinking in business, well, I should only read books on trading. Not true. Okay, you should read books on anything that challenge your mind and help you grow your mindset. I love books on any topic, even fiction or fact or whatever it is, that will help me see the world in a different way, challenge and allow me to grow. And that's where I love this. And we get into the next step here on auto-suggestion, Matt. This was what Napoleon Hill talked about, the medium for influencing the subconscious mind. Now, talk about other things that may have impacted us here. There was a great psychologist that was very popular about 20 years before here that talked about the id and the ego, right? This idea of the subconscious, Hill goes deep into it, and we get later into it in the book. And really, he has some steps here. He says, one, close your eyes. Repeat aloud the statement of the amount of money that you want to make. It's all about money here because he's reminding people you want to get rich. Rich is okay. By the way, tangent here on that for a second, Matt. That's not easy for everybody to accept, is it? That being rich is
No,
okay and
that because
embracing the idea of getting rich.
in most philosophy, and you can include religion in philosophy, in most philosophy, money's evil. That we should shy away from riches, and we should, basically escape from the mindset of money. And I understand why it's the refuting money to a certain extent, and I understand that, but money is a necessary thing in today's environment. It certainly was in the 1920s and 1930s and 1940s as well. Money has been something that we have had to utilize since uh, before we even use the barter system from an economics perspective. People have a tendency to think that the acquisition of money is based on some degree of greed, and that's not how I see it. I don't believe that simply acquiring money makes you a greedy individual. I think with riches you can do great things. I think it's the utilization of money that could be either greedy or not. With money, with free financial freedom, you can help other people more, you can achieve more, you can give back more, you can teach more, you can do more things to help society. And I think this refusion of money goes against one of his principles where he's talking about every transaction should be at the benefit of both parties in the transaction. And if we treat it like that, in terms of making every negotiation, every transaction, make sure it's in the benefit of all the parties to the transaction, then we shouldn't fear being rich. We should desire the being rich, and rich can also mean many different things. Remember what Napoleon talks about in the desire. The desire is not set forth by society; it's forth by the individual. You are the one that decides what rich means to you. And what I've always said in terms of think and grow rich, I've always defined rich as the freedom from money, not the freedom of money. And I hope you guys understand the difference of those two, of the freedom from money versus of money. If you have the ability to have financial freedom to where you don't have to work for somebody else, I would define that as rich, and I would also define that as a very healthy and a very good thing.
Oh, and I will say this auto-suggestion to me is something I've seen in many different forms in terms of coaching advice. I mean, you have to believe, it goes back to faith and desire and everything that is leading up to this step. This is just a calculated way of building it into your mind, telling yourself every day, reading a statement that this is what I'm going to do. Matt, if
Yeah.
I venture to guess that if you did go into the mirror every morning and say, yes, I am sexy and good morning handsome. By the end of a week, you're going to feel more handsome and positive. And by the end of a
Okay.
month and the end of the year, you know, by God, maybe you will be more handsome. It's the thing about telling yourself every day, or that, yes, I will be a trader, or
You're gonna
yes,
have you got a little strut in that step, I'll tell you that.
right.
So yeah.
It's something I believe is an important thing to do. And Matt, I took a coaching program last year, and they talked about this a little bit, where you can create a trigger in your daily routine with something that you already do naturally. Because remembering, to remind yourself is something that people drop the ball on. So let's say that after finish your email every day, or after you do your breakfast, or something that you do every day, no matter what, you then read a statement back to yourself that says, I am going to be the greatest trader in the world, or I am going to build a powerful business that allows me to quit my job, and I'll do it within this amount of time. I think that's where this auto suggestion, you got to make it your own. Create your own world, create your own vision, and remind yourself of it regularly as you build out your routine. Repeat it morning and night, and make sure you write it out. This quote at the bottom here, Matt, read it out loud. Very short one, but I love it.
I am the master of my fate, and I am the captain of my soul.
I agree
That's a
with
good one.
that. Yeah. Okay, number 4, specialized knowledge. This is where personal experiences or observations that you can build on. By the way, this is the current modern economy. when it comes
Yeah.
to consulting, when it comes to knowledge, when it comes to intellectual property. Very, very smart 80 years ago to think about this. People that were going, the dream in the 1930s, get a job for a company, right? Get a pension, all that kind of stuff. And what he's saying here is if you have specialized knowledge, you have a leg up on everybody. The truth is that schooling does but little more than to put one in the way of learning how to acquire practical knowledge. Agree? The free schools of America and the free public libraries do not impress people because they are free. Matt, how many times have you seen people that have free education do nothing with it?
Well, outside of a free meal or a free beer, I don't believe in anything else being that free. You look at the concept of free. People value free as what they get it. When you give things away for free, they have a tendency not to do anything with that charity to a certain extent. But I want to take it even a little step further than just the concept of free. But let's go back to personalized and specialized knowledge. Knowledge without application, and Napoleon Hill talks about this, but knowledge without application is just what I say it is. This is kind of my way of putting knowledge without application. It makes you, the Bobby Shannon before he learned how to be a trader.
Mm.
That's what this guy who was one of the smartest, and some of you might not know Bobby. He's a student of mine. I started mentoring a couple of years ago. He was an economist. We've had him on the podcast many times. He's one of the smartest men I've ever met. I mean, talk about name dropping. He can just drop name after name after name, and he can recite economic philosophy from people that I've never heard of, and it's like, oh my goodness, this guy is one of the smartest people I know. But he was also, living up in Walla Walla, Washington, as a winemaker, drinking more wine than he was actually selling. Bobby says that's effective and efficient, whether I agree with him or not. But what it made him is somebody who could dominate conversations, and what it made him was somebody who could, sit around the Sunday brunch and just everybody look at him and be like, oh my goodness, he's so smart and he's broke, and this. Knowledge without application is wasted energy. Knowledge with application is a life-changing endeavor, and that's where this is so important. It's having specialized knowledge is one thing, but it has to be applicable, and it has to be worked on, and it has to be applied in your area of the market, your industry, your sector, as a trader all the time. It doesn't matter if you know what an iron condor is if you never do it. It doesn't matter if you go to learn how to be a trader if you don't do it. You have to have application, and that's what makes knowledge life-changing.
Well, there's no question about it. And quite frankly, it's one of the most important things you can do in your business, even within trading. Let's take the microcosm of trading itself, Matt. A specialized knowledge or expertise in one area, like theta trading or cash flow trading or day trading, can run a business.
Yeah.
I've seen students who know a lot about trading, but they literally have not built a business because they haven't specialized in one area. And it's hard because you have to earn that. You have to build that, and you have to focus on
Well,
that through your daily exercises.
well, let's take that another step just in terms of trading, because that's what a lot of people are trying to focus on and learn from. Too often times I see people, they want to learn it all. They want to master it all. They want to learn it all, and they learn terms and rules for every strategy out there, but they don't know how to trade one of them, right? It's not about knowing everything. It's about specializing and perfecting the few. It's about, it's what Warren Buffett said. We believe in specialized knowledge. We believe in specific investments and not diversification, right? Diversification is diversifying loss is all it's doing. We believe in specializing and pinpointing on exactly what we want to do. For example, Tim, from a trading perspective, you know how to trade many different strategies, many different systems. I know how to trade many strategies, many systems, but we have those select few that we have mastered and that we have spent years and years and countless hours on mastering those. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean that I can't do a calendar spread. It just means I don't want to do a calendar spread. I want to do a covered call. I've mastered the covered call. I've mastered personal gold. I've mastered cash flow condors, those types of things. And so it's not about having 1 inch of knowledge over everything. It's about having 20 miles of knowledge on one thing.
There's no doubt about that. And, I tell a lot of stories about my students, and I think of the last 6 students I nominated for the Trading Hall of Fame. And Matt, they all had a different strategy when it came to their
Yeah.
actual business. Now, it might have been very similar, but maybe one day traded, or one did volatility trading, or one did the iron condor, or a naked put, or whatever it was, credit spreads, you know. And it's always impressive to me when I look at the people who build out, and perfect trading. And it is about all these different areas: desire, focus, motivation, faith, application, consistency, persistency, and then specialized knowledge. And so, as I was reading Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich here, which, on the podcast, we're loving this, I was thinking about how it applied to my own life and how it applies to my students' lives. And this is one of the reasons I love our book club, quite frankly. The next step in Napoleon Hill's thing is imagination, the
Yeah.
workshop of the mind. Now, Matt, he talks about two different types: synthetic imagination and creative imagination. And essentially, synthetic is that which you can create, you can produce because of your efforts. And creative is a product mostly just from you having the right state of mind, or the right muses, or the right ability. And there's so much here. And I do think that we have to commit time to producing ideas,
Yeah.
and I know for myself, and maybe one thing we could do here is, how do you produce ideas? I know for myself, meditation, reflection, taking a break. I'm famous, and I get teased for this, for taking walks during my mentorship. Um,
Well, I've teased you for that.
yeah, but for me, walking is a way to reset the brain. You know,
Oh, and I agree with you, by the way. I just like making fun of you.
yeah.
Um, the difference in synthetic versus creative comes to analytical versus the creative mindset, right? The creative, the left side, right side. This is kind of coming through here as well. Um, how do you create imagination? I don't know, Tim. I look at children, and how many of you guys here in the live podcast have children? Quite a bit, right? Yeah, and Tim and I do as well. I get amazed when I look at my 7-year-old, and she's just doing these things that I'm like, that makes no sense. Like, at all. That makes no sense. And she's just entertaining herself in her own mind. And we've all seen it in our kids, how all of a sudden they can just take something, and they just kind of see themselves doing something. And I remember, when I was younger, I used to do the same thing, Tim. I was really big into sports. And so I would go outside, and I would create these things. I was just shooting the basketball by myself, but I'd be like counting down from 10, and Michael Jordan's guarding me, and we're down one, and 5, 4, 3, and then I'd shoot the shot, a little fadeaway 15-footer, and if it didn't go in, I would pretend that I got fouled, and if it did, I would celebrate. And
Oh yeah.
I would do these creative things, just putting ourselves in different perspectives of doing something later on in your life. And later on in my life, I would come across those scenarios where I'm playing sports, or I'm doing this, where I was like, oh yeah, I was doing this when I was 2 years old, right? But in terms of the creating things, anything I've ever created that I've taken from idea, from the creation mindset, the idea to the application of it, has been in this environment. And believe this or not, guys, but this is every product I've ever created, for legacy, for tackle, you name it. Wouldn't this be cool?
Hmm.
Like, I'm dead serious. Wouldn't this be amazing? Wouldn't it be amazing if we all had this system that we all traded together, and we communicated with one another, and we had these videos kind of describing exactly what we do, and if we met every Tuesday night, and
Sure.
and wouldn't that be cool if we built this place where thousands upon thousands of people trading the same system can come together, and we can all help each other out, and do each other justice, all pun intended on that one. But it was always in that, wouldn't it be cool if we had this type mindset, right? And sometimes that idea, I'd come out and be like, well, that's not a very smart idea, and I wouldn't know if it was a smart idea. But and then I would tell people. I even told a group of new investors in Atlanta this past week where I said, some of the greatest ideas I've ever had in my life proved to be some of the dumbest ideas I've ever had in my life. We don't know until we kind of put ourselves in that position to actually do it, whether it's going to play out, play good or play bad. But the imagination is so powerful. When we look at our ability to create, we as human beings are the most creative people that we could possibly even fathom. I mean, we spend half of our days daydreaming just about something that would be amazing. I mean, just today, who here caught themselves daydreaming about doing something that was infinitely better than what you were doing at the time, right? We all do that, and that's that imagination. That's that child imagination coming out in us and putting ourselves in an environment that isn't it amazing, and see yourself there. And
Well,
it's going to take some hard work, and it's going to take some time, and it's going to take some failure, and it's going to take a can-do mentality, and people are going to say bad things about it, and people are going to disagree with it. But you're the one that had the vision. You're the one that had the imagination. You're the one who saw yourself in an environment that was absolutely amazing, and you cannot allow other people to justify your behavior based on their own limitations, not yours.
man's only limitation within reason lies in his development and use of his imagination. And Matt, I think what Hill talks about in this chapter in the book as well is that yes, the creative imagination is the more valuable one. Generally, the best ideas, the most original ideas, the way that you can impact people, yourself, your life, all that. But they don't always come, and so that's where synthetic imagination, where you got to force the issue sometimes. Sit down, write down 20 things that
So
you want
right
to
now,
do. Sit down
yep.
and back test, 100 trades on an iron condor. Get yourself into a trading simulator and day trade, for 10 hours, right? And write and get the results. This is where mentorship comes in, is synthetic imagination, in my opinion, because we can structure some of that to force you to have some of those aha moments. The creative stuff,
Well,
you never know when those light bulbs are going to click on.
it's true. You never know, but they do happen all the time.
Yep.
Those pistons in that brain, guys, they are firing all the time. Those pistons, they never shut down. Your brain is working overtime even when you don't think you are. They're constantly moving, constantly creating, constantly thinking, constantly doing something. And so, yeah, it's sometimes it's hard to put that thought process down on paper, but that's where that synthetic comes in. Is the creative is the visualization, whereas the synthetic is, okay, now let's put it in the paper and let's really see if this thing's going to work out or not. Then let's surround ourselves with other people who are going to help us achieve those things.
And so much of a beautiful mix. It's like two dance partners between the creative and the analytical. And Hill, one of the reasons why I think this book transcends time and it will be around for a long time is because he does talk about both in such passionate ways that I think it hits everybody. And the mindset and the ability for him to reach both audiences in such a good way, well before most people were, I think is one of the reasons why it's going to be a gem forever. And that's where you get into an analytical chapter here, which is organized planning, Matt. Where he talks about, okay, yes, we need a creative imagination, we need faith, we need desire, we need all these things, but we got to have a detailed step-by-step plan as well, because this is too important to drop the ball. And he talks a few things here, like getting a mastermind group. You and I, we use the phrase power team, right?
Power team.
We talk about mentors. We talk about having coaches. The quote that you're the sum of the five people you spend the most time with. Matt, how important has it been in your journey to have people around you that lift you up, challenge you, and hold you accountable?
Would not be here speaking to these amazing people tonight without them. Um, we can only do so much on our own. We have limitations, and Napoleon talks about that in the power of the mind in the ninth point where he talks about the power of the mind, mastermind. And we'll talk about it more, but we have limitations, and
Mhm.
the way I've always kind of felt it, Tim, is I can only know so much. I have intellectual limitations. I can only have so much. I have time limitations. I have financial limitations. I have all of these different limitations, and we all have them. Every single one of us have them. Some people are more effective, some people are more efficient, but we all have limitations in one's own ability. But compounding gains and compounding interest is one of the most powerful things in investing. It's one of the most powerful things in money, and it also works in compounding decisions. Making the decision 12 years ago to put Micah Brooks on my team, and to put Noah Davidson on my team, and to put Gino Poor on my team, and to put Jeff Crystal on my team, and to put Keith King on my team, and to put these amazing people on my team who had the things that I desired, led me to a life that I did not know exist. And if it wasn't for those individuals who had the things that I desired, and compounding the intellectual capacity of the individual, and now within a team environment, that led me to do great things, and it led you to do great things. And that's one of the reasons why, when we were trying to make the decision on are we gonna do, like I'm gonna give you a little bit of insight for those of you who are here tonight.
Mm-hmm.
3 years ago, when we came together, Noah, myself, Tim, and Gino, we were trying to make the determination of what was the brand name. Right? We had our company name, but we wanted to, what was our brand going to be? And I had the Trading Justice brand, and then there was this concept of, well, we could do a lot of things with the Justice name, especially from a financial perspective. And then we're thinking, but at the end of the day, guys, the one thing we believe in more than anything else, and I believe it was Noah who actually said this, was we believe in team. We believe in teamwork, and all of us are little, sports junkies to a certain extent, and when you look at sports are really driven through teamwork. The most successful franchise of all time are always based on teamwork, and you see that a lot in the military. You see that a lot in very successful environments, in business, in sports, in military, and government. Is you see it's all based on team and not the individual. Some of the greatest
that's right.
business
And think
people
about
of all
team,
time.
Matt, because you got to have a Tom Brady, and you also have to have the person who hikes the football, guards the left tackle, plays special teams, which is where I'm with you 100%. We have the sports theme, right, for a reason. And I think sometimes when we talk about mastermind groups and mentor groups and all this, if you're a new member of that group, you can feel like, well, I don't know if I'm contributing, which is where the be here is important. What do you bring to the group? Even if you're new, Matt, maybe, and if you're out there and you're new to tackle trading, maybe just showing up,
Showing
right?
up's half the battle.
Asking
Showing up's half the
questions,
battle.
right?
Yeah. But
You don't.
you have no clue how much it tells Tim and myself about the people that are here tonight. It tells us you guys are dedicated. You want something great. You're willing to put yourself in that environment, and you want to surround yourself with people that you want to have a very similar situation from, and that tells us a lot. Just showing up is half the battle. There's no doubt about that. But we are only a collection of the people we surround ourselves with.
Yeah, there's no question about it. And you got to meet regularly. Hill talks about meeting twice a week with, a planning group, your mastermind group, and have harmony between you and your group. That's where communication comes in. And guys, I practice daily gratitude for a reason. One thing I'm very grateful for here tonight is our podcast and our community. And Matt, I'm very grateful for you because you and I mean, you were the first person on my power team,
Yep.
and when we started doing this, we did it together, in which we were lucky. We had each other to push each other, and we have natural personalities where we will push each other. Not everybody's always had that, and so that's where this community and tackle trading has evolved, and that's where we're filling that need. There's no question about it.
Well,
Here's
and,
some.
and one last thing on that, Tim, real quick, before we get into kind of the traits of a leadership, is in the 1930s, it was very difficult to surround yourself with people of like-mindedness because you had limitations of travel and money. That's not the case in 2017. In 2017, there is an immense amount of people out there that meet all the time that you can access from around the world. I mean, Tim, we have people that download our podcast from every continent in
Yep.
the world. We have
Yep.
people that are part of Tackle Trading everywhere. We speak for Rich Dad Education and Legacy Education, where we travel around the world, conducting seminars on people that for people that want to have a life-changing experience. We have those things in 2017, whereas in Napoleon Hill's time, they didn't have those things. It's easier now today to become in what Napoleon would define as rich. It's easier to get there today, but it's also harder. Technology has made things more difficult. Our economic environment has made things more difficult. That's why it is so vitally important to surround yourself with a community and a team of like-minded people. Because if we're not going to help each other, then who is?
There's no question about it. In which, as a mentor and a leader, Matt, these are important things for you. As I read these ones out loud, these are what Hill says, defines a leader. Courage, check. Self-control, check. Justice, means you're fair, right? Also, our last name, which is nice. Everybody say justice in the chat. If you ever
Really
need
like that.
ego, be named after the Justice League. Whenever I show my ID at like the airport or something, they're like, "Oh, cool name, man." I'm like, "Yep, should have been a
Just
judge or a superhero."
don't don't go to law school with it. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. Definiteness of decision, definiteness of plans, doing more than paid for. A pleasing personality, sympathy and understanding, willingness to assume full responsibility, and cooperation. Now, out of all of
I
those,
want
Matt,
to, the one I want to talk about, Tim, is a pleasing
I
personality.
will ask you.
That's the one I want to talk
I
about
was going to
because
ask you.
I am a student of history, okay, and I've known a lot of very successful leaders who were a bunch of narcissists. Henry Ford was a
Yeah.
massive narcissist and one of the greatest business leaders of the 20th century.
I think this is Hill's own bias here, in that
He
maybe
might
this
have
is
he
what.
might have dealt too much with Carnegie. That that
Right.
that's probably that was probably a slight to Carnegie, saying, "Hey, if you don't want to, if you don't have to deal with assholes, that's an even better one, right?" But it does help in becoming a leader is to have people that want to follow you.
I
There's
think it
no doubt
takes all
about
kinds.
that.
I disagree with that one as well. I was going to ask you, out of all of those, which one do you agree with the most that is mandatory, and which one do you disagree with? So you disagree with
Some of
pleasing
the, well,
personality.
I'll tell you right now. I've worked under great people, not so great people, and some of the best leaders I've felt like gave great inspirational business discussions. It was knock you in your face, kick push you to achieve something that you don't think you could achieve, that isn't going to take, because you can disagree with what a pleasing personality means, but most people would say somebody who's in yelling at you, spitting in your face would not be so pleasing. But then you just missed out on an opportunity to sit down with Robert Kiyosaki and take upon his leadership,
Yeah.
and who I think is one of the greatest leaders that I've ever met.
Well,
you
look at
know
first of all, Kiyosaki's a great example. You and I know him. We've seen him
Stuff as nails.
in action, right? And you've been in boardrooms with him. Uh, I would say that there are many times he is very polite and pleasing. I've had Robert
He's
put his
awesome.
arm around me and almost in tears talking about his students and his vision.
Yeah.
But then I've seen him fiery, kicking somebody's ass verbally.
Yeah.
And so there are times where leadership requires a stern voice and a very clear directive of how to get better. And so I do disagree with pleasing personality that it's
I don't think it's
mandatory.
needed. I don't think it's needed. I,
I
I, I think it can be a factor, but I don't think it's needed. Courage, self-control, justice, definitive of decisions, planning, detail-oriented. I mean, just today, Tim, you heard me say to people, I need you guys to be more detail-oriented. I said that literally 4 times today to different people.
Yeah.
I need you to be more detail-oriented in terms of this. The one I love is actually underneath pleasing personality and being sympathetic, to the flight that people go through to achieve the things that they want to achieve. It's not easy to step outside the traditional models. It's
Yeah.
just not. We need to be sympathetic to the flight that people go under, because there's so many different things, and I see myself as a leader, guys, but there's so many things that people have to go through in life today to even get outside the rut, to get outside the just the nonsense that is thrown at us constantly. We should be understanding of that. We should be sympathetic of that. And you know what, Tim? Just this past weekend, I was talking to this individual in Atlanta who just had the nastiest story, just in tears. And I just put my arm around her and I just said, you know what? We will help you. I will put my arm around you. I will hold you up, right?
Yeah.
If you don't think you can walk, I will walk for you and you follow. We should be sympathetic and we should understand the flight that people go through. There's no doubt about that. Cooperation, willingness to assume full responsibility. I think a good leader at the end of the day, the buck stops there. And that was Truman had that on. The buck stops here, right? It's my responsibility. It's mine, right?
Well, that's
So I
my
do
that's
believe
my
that
favorite one on there, by the
accepting full
way.
responsibility is so important.
The a willingness to assume full responsibility. I think at the end of anything, think of your trading, guys. If you have a loss, it's your responsibility for the loss. Well, the market
Yeah,
crashed or the market's crazy. No, you had to research the expectation of crazy events and have it built into your plan. You have to know the difference between different strategies. Well, this mentor taught me that strategy. Doesn't matter. You're the one pulling the trigger, right? You have to assume full responsibility because you are going to assume full reward of the greatness that you build. And I think that it
yeah,
allows you to grow and get better. It's a responsible thing to do as a leader, and it's not always easy, and it's not always easy when somebody says or when you are reminded, well, you had a failure or you had a mistake or well, that's how you get better. I love that one there, Matt. Definitely leadership's a big part of it. The next step in Hill's book was decision. The mastery of procrastination, and this is where these processes come in. Make sure that you attack procrastination through building processes. I do think this is where left brain checklist productivity can be very helpful, Matt. You know, we're all lazy by nature. I know that you and I are very much not lazy by nature. Where do you attribute your work ethic to and your ability to really just get things done? Because you are one of the most productive people that I know.
oh, that's our old man. That's our dad. Um, One of the hardest working individuals that we've ever been around. You know, you guys don't know a lot about our heritage, but we're coal miners. We come from coal mine. The Justices tracked from Kentucky. When we came to Kentucky, we were coal miners in Kentucky. We tracked out to Utah. We were coal miners in Utah. Until my dad quit the mine in the 1970s, and our grandfather died of black lung in 1979. My father decided to go build a business, and he had 6 sons so that he could help build that business. It's called free labor. But I remember being 9, 10 years old, just on the work site, and constantly dad saying, you know what, guys, there's nothing free in life, nothing free. He came from a mother who was born and raised in the Great Depression, comes from the passive generation, who used to keep a bottle of mustard for 25 years and throw it in a can in a big old pot of stew to just give a little bit of zing to it.
She
And that
told me
was
the
kind of
answer.
our.
I asked her about that once. She said mustard's vinegar based, and vinegar doesn't go bad. So
I'm not disagreeing with her.
quit
I'm
your
also
whining and
not going
eat.
to eat the
That
stew. I'm not going to do it. But no, it comes from our father who taught us the value of hard work, the value of blue collar work, the value of blue collar ethics. And I'll always remember him saying, Matt, wherever you go in life, always remember where you came from. Just get out of Emory County. I mean, that was kind of his message. You get out of Emory County, but always remember your roots, where you came from. And it's to this day. I'm 39 years old today. I don't, and I actually, think it's somewhat of a failure of mine that I honestly don't know how not to work. I don't know how to do that. And sometimes I have to take a step back and say, okay, enjoy the fruits of labor, and consciously do that. Enjoy the fruits of labor. But I will say to this on the decision ability here in hard work. The two issues that people have to understand is issue number one is the lack of action in decision making is one of your failures and not one of your successes. Okay.
correct.
Entrepreneurs, when they see an opportunity, they don't ask how much and they don't try to figure it out right then. They say yes, and then they figure it out when they see that opportunity. They make decisions quick. Okay, whether they're right or wrong, they make decisions quick, and they stay with it, and they are persistent in just fighting to make that decision a reality, and they will only succumb to it when it has been proven to fail. Okay.
Well, this is where data-driven people, Matt, can really have a hard time. Like if you research which car you're going to buy for 3 months, trading is something you're going to have challenges with at first. You're going to have to break that habit. And the reality is, when you see an opportunity, you have to strike, Matt. You can't wait. You have to be decisive in your actions.
But Tim, I also think that, yes, we have to be decisive in our actions, and we have to be quick to make decisions when opportunity exists, because it doesn't exist forever in terms of that singular moment in time. But also, I think especially today in 2017, I think it's as a problem that people do make a decision that once they made the decision, they just think it's over. They think that's all you got to do is just make a decision, and then all of a sudden it's like just going to happen, right? And that's where, I've heard about the secret and all that stuff. Just see yourself there, and all of a sudden you become there. No, it takes hard work. It takes dedication. It takes desire. It takes investment in time. If you're going to make a decision, let's make it quick, and then let's make it work. Consumers will take forever to make a decision, and then once they make a decision, when it doesn't pound out immediately, they come off that decision immediately, and that's why they never achieve their lasting success. Is it takes them too long to make a decision, and then when it doesn't work out in the first week, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks, when things take years to become successful, then they're quickly away from it. Carnegie, who is the one who commissioned Napoleon Hill to do this, he was an immigrant with 1 penny to his name from Ireland when he came here, and it took him a lifetime to become the richest man in the world. It took Warren Buffett, who started investing at the age of 11 years old, a lifetime to achieve his financial success. It took Steve Jobs a lifetime of people who were going against him at Apple, who kicked him out of the CEO of Apple, to a lifetime to achieve something that changed the world. Guys, we have to learn how to make decisions based on probabilities and returns. And then once we do, then we have to continually put forth the effort, because learning is a lifetime of learning, and sometimes we fail along the ways.
I will say this as well. One of the reasons people fail to make a decision is because they're afraid of being wrong, and they're afraid of losing money or making a mistake, because then people will ridicule them. There's a great quote from that chapter, Matt. Close friends and relatives, while not meaning to do so, often handicap one through opinions and sometimes through ridicule that is meant to be humorous. Oh, look at you, you messed up, or you missed that shot, or whatever. And then people build inferiority complexes. This is a reminder that when you're on my power team, we build each other up. There's no negativity. As a leader, that's a rule, for a reason. And that's because we have to foster that confidence.
Yeah, let me say one thing to that, Tim. We do fear failure, we fear being wrong, and we fear these things, right? And Napoleon talks about the fears in the last chapter, and we'll talk about it. But why do we fear things we're so good at? And I know that's the analytical person in me coming out, but why do you fear making mistakes when you make mistakes every day of your life? You're very efficient at making mistakes, and so am I. Why do we fear failure when success is born out of failure? Why do we fear these things, losing money, when the fear of losing money leads you to do just that, save your money and then you lose it? Fear leads you to achieve everything that you feared in the first place. Does that make sense, everybody?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Right. And that's, I think, the whole point of having an analytical process to back you up with faith, action, auto-suggestion, the things that, Hill's talking about, making decisions through organized planning. It's all, and really this is the point of the book, and why at the very beginning of the book, he talked about this is going to be you working through the whole process, and he's leading you to where he wants you to have a systematic approach to making and building wealth in your life. Think and grow rich. And I really love it, Matt. Page 139 in my version of the book, there was 3 words that I think would be my band name if I started one. It just said Old Man Fear, all in capital letters. And I'm like, that could be an 80s rock band. I like it. Random thought there. But the next chapter is on persistence, Matt. The sustained effort necessary to induce faith. And it really kind of builds on the last message we talked about: cooperation, willpower, developing habits. These now in the modern world, we call them life hacks. We call them productivity hacks. We have daily routines. We have weekly routines. We have rules. We have checklists. All those types of things. It's really interesting to look at these these checklists. Talk about this one, Matt, persistence. Is it different than what we just said with decision? What do you see with the persistence?
Well, I think the persistence comes after the decision is made, and that's why it becomes after in the book as well. It's quick to make decision and then be persistent in playing that out. Once we made a decision, we do not know whether it's a great choice, a bad choice, or a neutral choice. We don't know until we play it out. But you have to give it the effort to see. You have to make sure that you put forth the effort and you sustain that effort, or you will never see if the faith you had in that decision was the right one in the first place.
Well, and here is his 4 steps to developing persistence. Have a definite purpose backed by a burning desire for its fulfillment. That's your vision, guys. I mean, I'm going to tell you something right now. If you don't have a big picture for your life, and this is where I don't mind that it may be more abstract. It doesn't have to be a stated amount of money, which is where our conversation went back to the first chapter there, Matt. But you need to develop that.
Yep.
Have a definite purpose for what you want in this world. And if you don't have it yet, believe me, it will come and it will evolve and it will change. Think about it, identify it, want it, meditate, have conversations, look at people that you look up to. Dream big, guys, and go for it. There's no question about it. And that burning desire for its fulfillment, you got to want to be great. I mean, if you're here in our live podcast, if you want to be great, say, I want to be great. Don't run away from that. Don't be shy about that. If you want to achieve something great, then type it in the chat. There's a reason why I get passionate, and it comes deep within my chest, Matt, when I get passionate about stuff like this. Because I know for a fact, having been a mentor for a long time, you have to have a strong, burning desire for greatness and for your goals, because you will run into hurdles, and that's okay. It's all part of this process. Number 2, you got to have a definite plan expressed in continuous action. 3, a mind closed tightly against all negative and discouraging influences. There is enough junk in this world. You have to guard your mind. There's no question about it. And, reading all these in here, Matt, everybody, I want to be great. I want to be great. I'm loving reading this. I want to be great. I want to be great. I want to be great. Hector says, I'm a millionaire in the making, right? This is the kind of attitude and energy we have in these teams. And the last one, then I'll get your thoughts on this process, Matt. A friendly alliance with one or more persons who will encourage one to follow through with both plan and purpose. Talk to me about number 3 there, Matt. Getting rid of negative influences in your life. That's a challenge in the world we live in with the troll online environment. What do you think of that?
It's tough. It's it's we call it the trolls, right? The trolls on the internet, brave behind their keyboards. It's we all want to have a positive influence on society, but there's so many people out there that have a negative experience, and there's so many people that are skeptical and cynical and so on and so forth, that they seek to look at other negative influences to kind of justify their own rationality to a certain extent. In 2017, we live in an information era where you can find whatever you want to find. If you want to find how bad God is, go just Google how bad God is, and I'm sure you'll find something negative on God. If you wanted to find out how bad of a person Mother Teresa was, then go Google how bad Mother Teresa is, and I'm sure you can find people that agree with whatever your ridiculous thought is, because Mother Teresa was amazing. You're going to find whatever you want to find is the point. Tim, we put out this podcast now, 204 episodes, guys. We've been doing it for over 2 years now. Every single week, Tim and I meet, and we get on the podcast, and we talk about trading. We talk about this. We talk about this, and we had somebody on iTunes the other day, about a month ago, right? That basically Tim and me suck. We suck, and we obviously don't even know what we're talking about, and It's I read it and I read it again and I read it again and I just kind of started smiling, and I just said thanks for downloading. Thank you for helping us get more downloads. I really do appreciate that. But it did bother me, Tim, because in my life I've tried to live my life as a positive individual, you know, positively, helping people out and whatnot. But I'm not going to let it stop me. That guy, whoever that guy was, I can't remember his name. It was Dean. That's who it was. Anyways, I'm not going to let it stop me from doing
Of
the
course
things
not.
that I know I need to do. I know it's not and I also know this, Tim, that if we're not pushing the boundaries of the intellectual thought, if we're not pushing the boundaries of the traditional system of investing, then we're not doing anything. Then we're not going out there and we're just being just the same way everybody else is. What drives me is my students. What drives
Sure.
me is the people that are on our team. What drives me is making change and leaving a legacy for future generations. I remember one of the first posts I made for Tackle Trading. I laid out all these different numbers about why you should invest in market ETFs instead of mutual funds, and I still remember promoting it to this day on Facebook. And there was this one guy on Facebook, and he was just ripping tackle trading, and we were just new, right? We were just new. We was not even done anything
I
out there
remember
yet.
that guy.
And he's all you guys need, you're just blah blah blah, scam this, and he says, quote in one of his comments, he says, all you need is a well diversified portfolio, and I just wrote financial advisor, right? And he was a financial advisor because he just read the thought. There was this guy, Emmett, what was his name? Emmett, God, I can't remember his name now. But he wrote a negative review of tackle trading. This guy had never been to tackle trading, never,
Never
not
even seen the
once,
website.
never even seen the website, never interviewed us, never went through our products, never did anything, and just wrote this massive negative review. And it's like, why am I going to allow negative people to influence my life when there is so much positive around? Why
Well,
am I going to, no, let me finish real quick. Why am I going to allow any bastion of negativity impact me from doing the things that I know I need to do in the future? Why are we going to let the trolls of life change us when we know what we're doing is with good reason and good purpose and just trying to do the best for people? Negativity, and at the end of the day, Tim, whenever we surround ourselves with negative people and a can't do mentality, we all have to realize there is a positive outcome somewhere. Okay? You cannot have a negative without a positive. That cannot exist. Okay? So when people are negative, what I just try to do is be on the positive side of the equation. Turn that negative into a positive. Turn that and through that, if you can go and if you can just lead by example, and if you can lead through the belief, through the faith, through the desire, through everything Napoleon is talking about, what my hope is that people will be attracted to positive and not negative. And
you
and,
know,
and you can't change what people are going to say. You can't change what they're going to think. You can just, like you said initially, Tim, you can lead them to the water, but you cannot force a horse to drink.
and I'll tell you this, Matt, and I got to cut in on this because you're getting me all fired up here. Guys, I was at the airport with Matt, and I remember when, after he had read one of those things, and I had mentioned something to him, and I'll say it again. I don't remember if I have this word for word, but it was a message I delivered to you, Matt. And we have too many great things to do in our life to worry about the mediocre minds of ignorant people. And, in everybody's life, you are going to encounter and run into somebody pushing back and telling you you can't do it or that you shouldn't try or whatever. And you have to get rid of those people because they are a cancer on your productivity, on your vision, and on your dreams. And you have to build this team of people around you that will build you up. I say no negativity in my ballroom, no negativity in my
So
class,
much
and
good
no
out there.
negativity in my team. Because quite frankly, Matt, what you asked is an important question. Why would I let it impact me? Well, because at the end of the day, we still are human beings. And there's an
You
old
know,
thing in like an Inuit tribe where, the chief talks about there's a good wolf and a bad wolf, and it's just which one you feed. And you have to focus on positivity and growth and improvement all the time. It's like what did Zig Ziglar say? We need motivation daily, just like bathing, because it's that important.
Zig said a
Focus
lot
on.
of things.
He said a lot of great
Yeah,
things.
he said a lot of good things.
Next one is
Love
Power of
that.
the Mastermind. Matt, talk about this one here.
Well, before we get into the power of the mastermind, Tim, very quickly, I just want to say this one thing about negativity, and we'll move on.
Yep.
Has Has anybody had a child that's ever been bullied at school?
Hmm.
Has anybody ever had that?
Few people popping in.
I have. I have.
Yeah.
And my son was bullied, right? My son was bullied. He's not into sports. He's kind of a gamer, a little more of a creative artist type kid. Just an awesome, amazing kid. But he was bullied, and he was bullied pretty hard to the point where we actually had to remove him from the school, and we taught him at home for about a year before we put him back in a Montessori school. I mean, we had 2 years of counseling, and I remember one time that, and this just a little bit ago, he was talking to me about, and he's only 14, 15 years old, guys, and I remember I was talking to him about all the goodness in life, all the goodness in people, and he's like, Dad, there's just people are bad, people are bad, people are bad. And he read all these things that are bad, just people are bad, and all these people are bad, and just the bullies are bad, and everything's bad, and he was really, 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 really struggling with it. And as a parent, you want to take that from your child, and you just want to hone it, right? You just want to take it from him, and you want to show him the goodness. And I'll tell you guys, I gave him, and I'm getting a little emotional here because this was a very powerful moment for me. But I remember Tim setting him down for about 45 straight minutes and just telling him story after story after story of the people I have met in my life at my seminars through Robert Kiyosaki, and just the beautiful people that I have met in my life that
Hmm.
were life-changing people that came through circumstance that they did not plan on, but they got through it anyways, and they used it as a learning tool, and it was just an amazing thing, and it just made me take a step back to realize, okay, how blessed that I am in my life to surround myself with some of the most amazing positive people that I've ever came across. And I'm not just talking about the gurus and the mentors and that. I'm talking about
The
the
people,
students,
yeah, the students, our team.
the students. I mean, you hear me say this all the time whenever we sign off the Trading Justice podcast or the Tackle Trading Coaches Show, is I say thank you so much for being the best part of Trading Justice or Tackle Trading. You guys have no clue how much you inspire us to do the things we do. And we all
Yeah.
have to surround ourselves with that positive mentality. Let the haters hate, let the trolls write, but don't let it influence us by doing the things that we need to do.
Thank you for the emotional moment there, Matt. I do appreciate you sharing. And, I know these stories you're talking about, and I've lived this message. I get the question every now and then, Tim, why do you go out and do this stuff? If you have four companies and you're a trader of, 12 years and you don't need the money for it, why do you do it? And what you just described is the reason. What we're building here is something great, and the reason why people stay with our team when they have the right attitude, and they'll stay forever,
Yep.
is because of what the impact can have on your life and other people's lives. And there's a commitment I always ask people when I am in that ballroom, and that is, once you guys become a part of this team, will you give back to the team?
Got to get back.
Because the mastermind group is not just about the mentor teaching you guys. It's about building a community. There's no question about it. I do love what Josh says here in the chat, Matt. Josh says, I've been personally bullied, and honestly, I'm stronger because of it. I'm grateful for the gifts my bullies gave me. And Josh, that is the right attitude, my friend, and I do honor that comment. I appreciate you sharing that.
And
We
and
have to grow
Josh
from that stuff.
and Josh, you probably weren't very grateful when it was happening. But as you grew and as you got older and as you learned from it, it's something that does stay with you. And I would say the same thing. I think it's sad that it had to happen, but I think it's such a beautiful mindset of what you just said. It's what I wish I would have called you up, Josh, in my conversation had you talk to my son and be like, yeah, but I'm very grateful for it. They were gifts. I think that's absolutely amazing.
Yeah. Now, next step in Napoleon Hill's book was to build that mastermind team, and these groups you're talking about, Matt. It is a logical process. He goes through the entire book. He says that it's got to be organized and intelligently directed knowledge. The mastermind may be defined as coordination of knowledge and effort in a spirit of harmony between two or more people for the attainment of a definite purpose. Read, think, and meditate as you read. Now, a mastermind group can be two people. Now, Hill in that chapter also talks about when you put two minds together, you now actually have created something that did not exist, and whatever those two minds can share. I talked about Carnegie's mastermind having over 50 people. What do you think is a good amount of input, or how big should a mastermind group be? How do you start this, Matt? What advice could you give?
Well, number one, you got to surround yourself with like-minded people that are working towards a common goal, right? If you don't have a group of like-minded people working towards a common goal, then it's just going to be anarchy to a certain extent. To get to kind of your obviously it starts with two, right? That's kind of what it starts with. And for you and me, it started with you and me. It was you and me decided we wanted to trade, decided we wanted to invest, and it kind of grew from there. As a business person myself, I think I believe in you can't have too many voices. You can't have too many cooks in the kitchen. And we've seen that in our lives many times. We've seen that in bigger businesses many times where they have too many cooks in that kitchen, too many people, and the more people you surround yourself with into that, you also increase the possibility of somebody not exactly working in the same direction with the same mindset, with the same work ethic. I've always felt like for me, a smaller team of motivated people can achieve greatness. I think you start by putting yourself 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 people on. You add a couple over time. You add your mentor, you add your coach, and so on and so forth. But I definitely do see as you get bigger, you can lose effectiveness, and you certainly can lose efficiency.
There's no question about it. And guys, building a mastermind group, a coaching group, think tank, a power team, whatever you want to call it. But make sure that you're putting people on that are building you up, obviously. This should be a mandatory
also,
statement.
Tim, I don't think Carnegie called 50 people at the time trying to get a say on one decision either.
Correct.
I mean,
Right.
you're talking about over a lifetime of success, having different aspects in different industries, different situations. Like when you're talking about building a business right now, you're talking marketing, product, finance, visionary. You're talking about different areas of a successful business, and so that 50 people, I'm sure that was multiple different businesses, multiple different industries, multiple different things, and that might seem daunting, but you know what? We're here, right? We got 2 people here. There's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people willing to help at any time. But I think for a core master the mindset type mentality, I like an elite group of a very few people, not a lot.
I agree. And this next one, actually, this was in this chapter. It's maybe my favorite quote out of the entire book, Matt. And, I just want you to think about this. And he's talking about building a power team, building a mastermind group, all that. He says, every man who's accumulated a great fortune has recognized the existence of this stream of life. He's talking about energy, having positive people around you, building you up. He then goes on, he says, it consists of one's thinking process. The positive emotions of thought form the side of the stream which carries one to fortune. The negative emotions form the side which carries one down to poverty. And it's a consistent message throughout the book. Think and grow rich. Build on the positivity, create structure and process there. Definitely an important part of what we're doing. The next chapter, Matt, and the next step in developing your wealth and, getting rich is the mystery of sex transmutation. Now, guys, I can promise you that I am willing to let this get weird. Okay, I have no problem with that.
I will tell you, Tim, if we were not in a live podcast with a whole bunch of people here, we probably would get weird on the normal podcast.
I will say this. I remember when I first read this, I assumed it was going to be something that it was not. I first thought when I read the title and everything, I thought he was talking about like the Plato, mindset. Plato talked about this in ancient Greece, in the Republic, that avoiding sexual urges and all that kind of stuff is an important part of being a philosopher. And then the George Costanza episode where he stopped having sex in Seinfeld and he
Yeah,
became
that's a
the
good one.
genius. Completely different mindset. And then you read the chapter, and actually what he's talking about is guys, and men and women embrace it because
Hold on.
sexuality is.
Let's put what he really was talking about. What he's really talking about is the success. The ultimate success of a man is having a good woman behind him who supports him, who
There was
supports.
some sexism here. There's no
There's
question
a
about
lot
it.
of sexism here. Come on. This was 1937. You're trying to make it. No, he was talking about at the time, all successful men have a successful woman. And, it reminded me of a little bit of old Catholicism, St. Thomas Aquinas, to a certain extent. It
Sure.
reminds me of just that old, every successful man has a successful woman, or the what is it? The one that comes the old ancient proverb about a good life is a happy wife, right? All that stuff. But I think what he's really just talking about is companionship.
Well,
When
some of that, but he also gets into the idea that, sex is one of the most creative aspects we have, and it drives the second that you give up on wanting to have sex, I mean, maybe you've given up on creativity and drive and focus and all that. I think he's also pulling a lot of it back into that as well. I will say this. I think it's probably a controversial
so
chapter,
if
but
that's the interpretation of this, Tim, how oftentimes should you have sex to live that quality life? I mean, if that is the interpretation, Tim, I
hold on.
want
Let me
the
get let
analytical
me ask my
brain
wife.
wants some numbers behind it. I mean,
Yeah.
we've been talking about how he laid out the vision and then he gave that step by step guide. So if the creative mindset is we need to have more sex, then how much more do we need? I mean, come on, let's lay out the step by step guide here.
Well, tomorrow is Valentine's Day. I think that I might be able to give you report back on the next podcast, Matt. I'll let you know, and I'll let you know if it affected my creativity. Oh no, I'm telling you, this can go a lot of different ways. There are two forces on this conversation. There's the positive and there's the negative, and I'm not
Well,
sure which one I want to feed here because
I'm
I'm.
feeding the positive. I'm taking this in I'm taking your interpretation literally. That is what I am taking your interpretation.
Oh my, all right. Well, I will say this. In my life, when I do have things that focus on positive stimulation, okay, and he had 10 different stimulus that can affect the mind. Sex was one of them. Love, power, fame, music, creativity, friendship, having a mastermind alliance, confronting suffering, even negative things, sometimes you can grow from those.
Yeah.
Developing autosuggestion, like the thing we talked about, approaching fear, overcoming fear, you know, and he even mentioned narcotics, and we could get into some weird stuff there like psychedelics and mushrooms like Joe Rogan does. We'll leave that one for another time as well.
Yeah, we'll leave
But
that one for the narcotic podcast. We'll leave that one for that.
we'll go listen to the Burning Man podcast that me and Dean did 2 years ago. But I will say this. Creativity is something that can come from a lot of different areas. I
Yeah.
think most people would agree with that.
Well,
And when
the
we are
one that stands
living
out to
life,
me,
yeah,
the one that stands out to me is music. And I don't know why I just went to music, but just sometimes I'll just put the headset on and just put just random music, just whatever, just playing on Pandora at the time, and it does get my brain kind of working. You were talking about how you have those synthetic energies and you have the creative ones, right? Well,
mm,
music does have a way for me to really kind of get that creative thought process going.
sure. Well, Matt, I will tell you this. There's a blog I follow, and whenever I need motivation, I go to this exact post that they called it on motivation. And they say, turn on some loud music, you know, turn on something that makes you get up off your feet, right? Move around, stimulate your brain, call a friend and tell them that you love them. Tell them that they inspire you. Do something positive And I think the sex thing that Hill's talking about is that sex in a positive way is maybe a pure form of that as well. But it can be a lot of different things. Call your mentor, call a friend, call a team member, call somebody that's going to inspire you. If you want to be inspired and if you want to be creative, go around creative people. Listen to a podcast, listen to a book, go see a movie, put in your best movie. You know what I love, Matt? We did this the other day. One of our most popular threads and posts we ever had was when we asked people to put up the video of what
The
they're
best
motivated by.
motivational video. Yeah,
People
that
love
was a good
this.
one.
We all know this. We all know that it drives us, and sometimes you might need a little artificial stimulation by getting a YouTube video on, getting an inspiring TED Talk on. I'll tell you this: when I see the speech from Al Pacino in what's that football movie at halftime,
Oh, yeah.
it
It's
it wasn't
the
a great
fake Miami
any
Dolphins.
given Sunday.
It was the Sharks. Yeah, any
Any
given
given
Sunday.
Sunday. That fires me up, when I turn on something like that. I love it. The death crawl video. I love it. Music and movies and some of these things, we all know it. And I would recommend everybody keep a collection of your favorites because you might need to pull them out like a tool in your tool bag and drive you. Now, Matt, let's move on to the next one here. This is the subconscious mind. He talks about the positive emotions and the negative emotions. I'll read the negative ones first. Fear, jealousy, hatred, revenge, greed, superstition, and anger. Read those positive ones out for us.
Desire, faith, love, sex, enthusiasm, romance, and hope.
Now, what do you think? Let's deal with the negative ones here. What do you think is the most debilitating to somebody's goals?
Hatred.
Hatred.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think hatred encompasses all of the other ones in some capacity. Um, but I think hatred for me is the one that is by far the most debilitating emotion. Um, it just I just don't think anything has ever created greatness out of hatred. I just don't see that. There's too much love, there's too much goodness, and I believe we are born as creators. I believe we're born as positive human beings. I believe we all want to do the best for
yeah.
each other, and I don't believe how hatred equates in that.
I would agree with that. And forgiveness is a hard thing. I know that there are people that deal with experiences in their life that have not come to that moment. And, I know that through meditation and self-reflection and continued growth, you can achieve that. And Matt, I've had those moments in my life, and I agree with you. I think that's probably number one. I would say out of the other ones up there, they're all negative emotions. Fear is a big one, but that's a natural one. I would tell you if fear is debilitating, go after it. If jealousy is something that you experience, stop. One of the things about mindset that I think is really tough is this idea that if somebody else gets rich, that means that you can't, or that means that that you won't, or there's a definite amount of wealth or money or influence out there. There's not. We can all get rich together. I think that jealousy one can be a negative one as well, Matt. We grew up in a small town, and I saw this personally quite often, with people in business. They would see their neighbor or their friend do something well or get a new contract for, a house to build or a business. They would open a business, and then they would drive literally to the next neighborhood, just to avoid doing business with them because they didn't want to see their neighbor get rich. I saw it in my life. And so I don't know where some of this negativity comes from, but guys, I think if you're going to be great, you have to avoid and confront these negative emotions in all different forms of them.
One thing I will say, Tim, on that negative emotion very quickly is the one, not hatred but anger. I know myself, I have had anger in my heart before, many times. And sometimes it has manifested itself in a negative, right? In getting emotional and doing something that later on we look at and we're like, oh man, I wish I wouldn't have done that one. But I've also, and this might just be me, guys, but I've had anger in my life when it actually did drive me to achieve something that you could say that was great. So I don't know about the anger one. Anger can't lead to hatred, but it can lead to motivation, is what I'm
I
trying to say.
think that any negative emotion you have to acknowledge that you're going to have moments of those things. I think we're
Well, the
identifying
line
and
the
right.
line between positive and negative can be very, very small sometimes.
Which is the whole point of the book. The whole point of the process is to build processes in your life and mindset in your life to build on positive and get rid of negative. I think if there's one consistent message throughout that is that through analytical rules and processes, you can foster the positive results of having creative, thoughtful, inspiring people around you, right? I mean, this is an amazing thing. And it goes to those positive emotions. We know the negative ones. You have to deal with them. You can't just avoid them, right? You can't just, plead ignorance. We know we have these things. The positive ones, Matt, desire, faith, love, sex, enthusiasm, romance, and hope. Which one do you think is most important? For you and for you as a leader to show your team members.
They're all amazing. I keep coming back to hope. I keep
Hope.
coming back to it. I keep coming back to hope. If we give up hope, we give up everything else. If you give up hope, you give up desire, you give up faith, you give up sex, you give up love, you give up enthusiasm, you give up romance. Without hope, Disney does not exist. I mean, they just don't. Hope is the most beautiful thing in the world. It drives us to achieve all those
Mhm.
other things, right? So I come back to hope.
I like hope, and I will say this though, that is for me personally, I would answer hope. For me, when I'm teaching a class or in a seminar room or workshop room, enthusiasm, Matt. I think you gotta show people how excited you are because this stuff is awesome. And when somebody's new, they're dealing with those negative emotions. When they see an enthusiastic, excited teacher and mentor, many times I know for myself when I see that, it's like, holy cow, this is great. I want to do that. Look at that. And that's where teamwork and being a part of a mastermind comes in. Guys, when we come in the chat and we're in like a coach's show, like tomorrow night when we'll be in one, and I ask you guys to like pop in the chat and say, hey, great job, or let's go team, or welcome the new members, it's because I know that enthusiasm may impact somebody, because it has impacted me many times in my
Hey,
life.
enthusiasm is addictive.
Yeah.
When you surround yourself with that wow, that energy in that room, you can just feel it, right? You can just feel that energy, and you want to become a part of that energy. It's pretty cool.
Short chapter on this one, it was the brain. And he talks about developing a sixth sense where, you're broadcasting and receiving station for thought. He details things like the creative imagination and how you can get there and even the potential for telepathy. I do think this is where the science maybe had completely left the building, but I understand. And these were his mindsets, and he believed in something well outside of just normal scientific fact, and he
Well,
believed in
he's being
emotion and
very
desire and hope.
creative in this chapter, I would say. That creative thought. What I'll say about the sixth sense is this, and this is kind of what I believe. When you have a trained eye, trust the eye. For example, when you're reading a chart and you have been educated on how to read a chart, your eye tells you truth, right? When you have a trained eye, trust that. That becomes a sixth sense in putting all of these things together. Okay, that's why you can make those decisions quickly, is because you are trained. It's because you have a vision. It's because you have a desire. It's because you have a roadmap. It's because you have specialized knowledge. You've been doing your auto suggestions morning and night, telling yourself how sexy you are. You've been imagining yourself in this amazing, amazing world. You've planned it. Everything, all those other 12 steps leads to that sixth sense. It's not just this random, and yeah, I know he gets a little random there, but it's not randomness. Success is not randomness. It's the
Yeah.
combination of everything else that Napoleon is talking about in that. That's what leads to that success, and that's what that sixth sense is putting everything else in action in its most effective and its most efficient way.
Yeah, and that's right. And you and I have a mentor who taught us on how to educate people. And you've told the story many times. And she had a term she called unconsciously competent, right?
Yep.
Where you just know how to do what you need to do because it's just built into you.
Big
Malcolm
shot out.
Gladwell in his book talked about 10,000 hours. I don't think that's necessarily the only blueprint, by the way.
No, you don't
There's
need to
lots of
put
ways.
10,000 hours if you have 10,000 people on your team putting an hour.
That's
Right?
right.
I mean, you can compound that as well. And just to give her credit, Chris Schaefer, one of the leading educational specialists, we had a fortunate ability to spend a couple of years with her, learning the art of teaching other people. Because just because you have a skill set that you feel you perfected doesn't mean you know how to teach that to other people. I mean, we've all met those people in our lives where they have a skill set, but then they try to teach you, and it's like, I think I'm dumber. I
Mm.
truly do believe I now know, you know, I know less now than when I started this training. It's because there's a difference in the skill set of a trader or an engineer or a lawyer and that of a teacher. They're just two different skill sets.
Well, and developing the Sixth Sense, which was also a great movie, by the way, one of the great endings of all time. And I don't want to do the
Don't ruin
spoiler
it
alert,
for
but it's
don't ruin it for me. I haven't
been
seen it
around
yet.
20 years. But no, what Hill's talking about with the Sixth Sense is this is the door to the Temple of Wisdom. And he says the Sixth Sense is that portion of the subconscious mind. It's also the 13th step here in his process to building wealth, which has been referred to as the creative imagination. It's also been referred to as the receiving set through which ideas, plans, and thoughts flash into the mind. The flashes are sometimes called hunches or inspirations. And I think this goes back to the entire process here, Matt.
Yeah.
The reason why he's saying faith, desire, autosuggestion, specialized knowledge, imagination, organized planning, decision, persistency, power of having the mastermind team around you, sex transmutation, the subconscious mind, the brain, because it will result in this ability to create great things and to
Well, it's
do
the
great
summit.
things.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
it's however you want to put that, the apex, the summit, the foundation, it's the culmination of Napoleon Hill's great work. Is it leads to that sixth sense.
And yeah, I agree with that. And then he had his last chapter, which was not necessarily a step in his process. But it's interesting that he did put it last. He says, how to outwit the six ghosts of fear. And the fear of poverty, the fear of criticism, the fear of ill health, the fear of loss of love of someone, the fear of old age, and the fear of death. Fears are something we all naturally have. They are important. In fact, Jeff and Josh here in the chat say about emotions. I think this would lead into fear, guys, as well. They say it's both positive and negative emotions are important and serve their roles. The positive emotions cannot exist without the negative emotions, and vice versa. Also, when one side is focused on, the other will become forcefully to balance the scale. I think with fear, Matt, I would apply the same kind of logic. Without fear, you don't have hope. You know, if you don't overcome or tackle or deal with your fear, you don't have necessarily the proper plan or the ability to have that sixth sense. We deal with fear all the time, but we also deal with our students' fears all the time. And can you speak of when it comes to fears here and the importance to outwit them and to deal with them?
It's a tough one because we all have fear. Um, I would say if you were to rank just these ones, obviously these are not a complete list of fear. I think most people would put poverty, criticism, and ill health below loss of someone they love, old age, and death. So it's how you kind of see these manifest in yourselves. But I also believe fear is a symptom of knowledge base, and it's a symptom of personality, and it's a symptom of how we see ourselves. Inferiority. It's a symptom of I've read it say it's a lack of initiative or a lack of ambition or whatever it is. But it all goes back to some type of problem that we personally have that we have to overcome. In terms of fear, I think the most, bringing it back to kind of what we do in teaching other people, I would say the number one fear that most people have is the fear of being wrong. the fear of losing money, the fear of making a bad decision, the fear of losing time. I had a great mentor tell me, the number one fears that most people have are not poverty, criticism, ill health, old age or whatnot. The number one fears that people deal with are just fear itself of the unknown, the fear of loss, the fear of time, and the fear of money. And what I said initially, guys, I still believe in to my core. All fear does is basically put us in that environment that we are overcome from a mindset of thinking about these fears to the point that we don't achieve the other things that lead to a quality life. When we're sitting there and we're overcome with the fear of being critical, well, then we're not out there changing other people's life. When we fear, losing time, we have a tendency to go work for other people to where we absolutely lose time. When we fear losing money, it leads us to losing money. It doesn't mean that the rich do not have fear, and rich being a subjective term, obviously. It means that they don't allow fear to stop them. They are not just absolutely addicted to fear to have fear lead them. Fear can be a positive and it can be a negative. I believe that. I believe fear is real in the sense that how it manifests itself in us to do something great or to do something not so great. Fear can lead people to doing amazing things, and it can lead people to doing things that put even greater obstacles and hurdles in front of their path to success. What I would suggest is recognize fear for what it is, and it simply is a lack of knowledge in certain things. Acquire knowledge. Knowledge replaces fear.
100%. And that's where processes come in. That's where continued creativity and stimulus comes in. And really, Think and Grow Rich, the process to developing wealth. Guys, tonight's agenda, have fun. Did you guys have fun tonight, by the way, if you were here? Did you enjoy the conversation? I had a blast. This was a heck of a lot of fun.
I will tell you right now, Tim, I was not planning on going 2 hours. And I just want to say thank you so much for coming here tonight. Thank you so much for being a part of this. Thank you so much for your questions. Thank you so much for being a part of the podcast, for reading the book. And I just, whenever I see people come and trying to get better, I just get inspired to go do amazing things. Thank you.
Good discussion here on the book. If you have a question, now's a good time to put it in the chat. And Matt, as we kind of watch the chat come through here, let's also kind of think of our final thoughts, and let's wrap this up in the next probably 10 minutes or so. Let's see here. Brad May, by the way. Brad, you have a mic, I believe. Brad is a coach at Tackle Trading. We invited him to come and hang out for the podcast. Brad, what were your thoughts on the book? I mean, we kind of went through a lot of this here, but what's your takeaway from the whole conversation tonight?
Hey, can you hear me all right?
Yep.
All right. I love this book. I'll be honest, though, the first time I went to read it, I only had a PDF version, and it was really annoying. And I was like, okay, faith, perseverance, desire, I got it, good. I stopped reading it. Put it on the shelf until now, and I read it in a couple weeks, finished a week or two ago. And I don't know, there's so much into it. You guys did justice to everything in there. So that was great. But one of the things that I was just looking at in one of my markings was, he said, you may see at one and the same time both your best friend and your greatest enemy by stepping in front of a mirror. And that's really what it gets at, is it's all in your mind. Like all of these fears that you go through, you just have to overcome it. You just have to do something about it, and good stuff happens.
I was at an event here this last weekend, Brad, and one of my mentors, a person I've known a long time, Matt, has worked with Lori Waddell for a long time. I was watching her speak to a group of new entrepreneurs, and she does this piece where she says, "I am wanted, I am worthy, I do, and I succeed." And you're right. We have to build ourselves up. We have to build our positivity up, because it's about feeding that. And I appreciate you sharing that. Jeff and Josh Cole have a question here, Matt. Let's read this one. I get that you kind of went into throughout the podcast, but if Napoleon Hill wrote this book just a few years ago, what is one thing you think he would have changed from the original manuscript? Well, I think his editors would have changed
I think the
his
mystery of sex
examples on
transmutation would have
sex.
been changed there, Jeff and Josh. I definitely think it's the sex transmutation would have changed
Well, not the
dramatically.
idea, by the way. By the way, the idea that sex can stimulate you, that's fine. But all of his examples were men with attractive secretaries and whatnot. A little bit sexist, I would say, is a fair thing to say, Matt. So I think that's one thing that would change there, Josh and Jeff. But I don't know, man. I'm looking at the steps. Desire, faith, auto-suggestion, specialized knowledge, imagination, organized planning, decision, persistence, power of the mastermind, mystery of sex, transmutation, the subconscious mind, the brain, the sixth sense, and how to outwit the six ghosts of fear. There were a few X's I put in there. I think that he did have some of the idea of media wrong.
Yeah.
There was one example I remember reading about in the book where he thought that, on the way that radio would develop and this and that you would not have people ranting and raving. I'm just thinking he should see media today. I wonder what he would say about these negative influences with,
He would
you think
say, you know what he would say, Tim? He would say, delete your Facebook account. That's
yeah,
probably what he would say. Delete your
probably.
Facebook account. Get on Instagram where you can't have it. So I think he would be a proponent of Instagram and not so much of Facebook. But definitely the mystery of sex transmutation. I believe that the principles are there, okay, but obviously that would change a little bit. The media, I mean, media has evolved so
Found the
much
quote.
just in the
Found the
last
quote.
20 years. Yeah.
I found the quote. This one was in the chapter on imagination. He says, crooners and light chatter artists who now pollute the air with wisecracks and silly giggles. This was radio, 1937. Will go the way of all light timbers, and their places will be taken by real artists who interpret carefully planned programs which have been designed to service the minds of men as well as provide entertainment. I wish we lived in a world where all programming was inspirational, planned, and it did replace the silly giggles and whatnot. There is some of that out there, Matt, but just like the whole message in the book, you have to go out and find it. I think he might go after media a lot more, strongly there, Jeff and Josh. But I think the
And
overall
Tim, all
process is,
media, all
yeah,
media, not just certain portions of media. He would go after all media for what it has evolved into, because
yeah,
what he was criticizing. It is now on steroids time 1 million, right?
yeah,
I think he
for
would go
sure.
after all media.
Yeah, for sure. Um, But the consistency of the steps, I don't think that you're going to see that change. Honestly, guys, this message, if you pick up a Tony Robbins book, it's
It's the
probably
same
in
message.
same message.
It's the
You
same
pick up
message.
you watch a Simon Sinek, talk. A lot
Zig
of it's going to be
Ziglar,
one of these steps. Zig Ziglar,
Jim Rome.
Jim Rohn, yeah, it is absolutely it works,
I
and it
honestly
has
do not
inspired.
believe the keys to success have changed dramatically since ancient Greece when Socrates and Plato and Aristotle were talking about it.
I will say this. The other thing is, you have to put this in a context of how revolutionary it was. I was telling my wife, I was going through the book notes with her, Matt, and there was a really interesting section in the organized planning chapter where he talks about building. He didn't call it a resume. What did he call it? In a written brief. He called it a brief. And I was like, well, education, you got to put your education, your experience, your references, a photograph of yourself, apply for a specific position, qualifications, offer to go to work on probation. You have the knowledge of your employer's business. And she said, Tim, you got to think about this. Grandpa, who recently passed, when he was about 90 years old, she said he was working in the 1930s. I don't think he would have known what a resume was. Some people reading that book were getting practical, applicable knowledge of, organization, planning, and discipline that they may have never heard anywhere in their life. Uh, Maybe one of the reasons why it's one of the most read financial books of all time.
Yeah.
He's talking about things that now we take for granted 80 years ago. And it's why I love the book and why I do
Well,
recommend it.
it's
It's
why
on our
it's
reading
widely
list.
regarded as the #1 self-help business book, entrepreneurial book of all time.
Yeah, absolutely. Matt, final thoughts. You want to go first?
Final thoughts from you guys, just always pretty much the same. I just get inspired all the time by seeing amazing people trying to do amazing things. And I just thank you guys so much for coming out here, supporting the podcast, supporting the book club, especially in our desire for people to start reading more and getting off Facebook more. So thank you so much for, like I said earlier today, being the best part of Trading Justice. Really do appreciate it.
Well, and I will give you one last final thought from me. I believe in continued education in all forms. Meditation, exercise, self-development, conversation, community, friendship, mentorship, reading. And, some of the books we pick for the book club, they're about mindset, and some are about education, and some are about trading philosophy, and some are about market history, and some in the future are going to be about economics or philosophy. And I'm going to tell you right now, as somebody who does this every day in terms of trying to develop and grow, guys, you got to embrace the process. And I hope that you loved this conversation. I sure did. Just reiterate, Matt, what you said. Thank you guys for being a part of our team. Share the message, give it and pay it forward, and adopt processes that can help you develop and achieve your
And
goals and your dreams.
and last but certainly not least, guys, Roel Sarmingo is going to be on our podcast next month to discuss his book, Undiscovered Riches. Roel's been on our team for a few years now, and I am looking very much forward to bringing Roel on the podcast and having the author. It's always good to have the author there, like when we had Andy on 401 Chaos. That was awesome having Andy on 401 Chaos. We're going to have Roel here to talk about his book, Undiscovered Riches. So definitely go check that out. Read the book. I think that is an awesome book as well. Yeah, that 401 Chaos pod was ridiculous. It was so awesome. Guys, thank you so much. If you like the podcast, make sure to download it and give it a nice little review on iTunes over there. Also, we will be having a podcast come out later this week where I am going to be having a live podcast with my team out there from Los Angeles. It's Bobby Shannon's last event with me, and as my student, we're going to sit there and talk about the journey and the journey of going from no knowledge to becoming someone who's developing trading systems. That's going to be awesome as well, so check that one out, and we'll see you guys tomorrow night in the coaches show, and next week, later on this week, in the next edition of the podcast. Thank you guys so much. We'll see you later.
Peace out, guys.